Coming up next Monday on The Real Story.
We'll explore the mind of a rapist and learn what causes them to commit such a devastating crime.
I'm a disgusting, dirty person. Everybody's going to know this. Why hold these feelings in? So I decided, that's when I decided to act them out. I felt out of control.
That story and more coming up Monday on The Real Story at 8 and 11 o'clock Eastern Time on CNBC.
Consumer confidence is down again, and so are the president's approval ratings. All this as the White House prepares to face the nation to present the State of the Union address. These stories and more next on Business Insiders.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Business Insiders. How do you figure a day like today out? The president preparing to make a crucial State of the Union speech considered to be what could be a watershed event in his presidency. And on that same day, when anxieties are growing about what is or isn't happening to the U.S. economy, a subtle reminder that it isn't doing too well. The latest Conference Board numbers show that consumer confidence is dipping, and that even after Wall Street went on a bullish rampage after the Federal Reserve cut the discount rate a full percentage point back on December 20th. Why isn't Main Street going along with Wall Street? To address those issues and what might be at hand for the president tonight, Larry Kudlow, chief economist at Bear Stearns, also a former Politico of note, one of the key men in the Office of Management and Budget during the Reagan years. Good to have you with us, Larry.
Neil.
And Bill Womack, chief economist at Business Week as well as CNBC. Always good to have you, Bill.
Neil.
Larry, let's sort of get a view here of what happened. I was mentioning the market soaring today. I just want to point out for our viewers, we were up 31.5 points today. We've got a new record closing on the Dow, 3272.24, or 14, I should add. The bond market up almost a full point. Are they seeing something the rest of us aren't, or what?
Well, I think one of the key factors for this whole stock market move over the last year is the combination of declining inflation and inflation expectations, as well as declining interest rates, which traditionally, as you know, causes an expansion of stock market multiples, and down the road is signaling some kind of recovery, perhaps in our lifetime. But the stock market is clearly responding to the very low inflation rate and the prospects that interest rates could move to 30-year lows before this year is over.
That might be so, but Bill, I'm tempted to look at some of these numbers behind the numbers. We were mentioning that Main Street isn't going along with Wall Street, that consumer confidence, even after that December 20th cut in interest rates, that dramatic one full percentage point cut. Wall Street obviously went on a tear. By now, my math, about 380 points. Not Main Street. What's the matter?
I think the answer to that question is that the market's responding to an increase in liquidity, to lower interest rates and to a relatively stimulative monetary policy, and that's what the market's responding to. It's very interesting that today, when the market went to new highs, we're back to the old scenario where bad news is good news. I mean, the bond, the consumer confidence index was bad. The bond market rallied, and the stocks came up with it. The stock market as a whole was weak. It was a couple of companies with good earnings like Disney and Procter & Gamble, and some housing stocks which are depending on this $5,000 credit for new home buyers, if in fact we get it in the State of the Union tonight. And that's all it is. It's not a very cheerful picture. It's just the economy responding. It's the market responding to low interest rates.
But there's not much faith inherent in what's going on either with the system or, for that matter, with the president. A good CBS News New York Times poll out today, Larry, I'm sure you're aware, 43% approval rating. We're almost talking Carter numbers here.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that. And I think the consumer confidence problem reflects two issues principally. Number one, there is no recovery in jobs and employment. And there is a certain discouragement out there about the possibilities in the next 12 months. And obviously, without jobs, there's no incomes, and without incomes, you're not going to get any revival of consumer spending. The other issue is, I think, with respect to Bush and the whole political situation today, I don't think the American public really has much confidence either in the people running now for this presidential race in both political parties or, frankly, in the congressional leadership process. We've had a lot of disappointments. There hasn't been any new economic game plan, maybe tonight, maybe not. We've had a lot of corruption. We've had a lot of disappointment. And I think this is all reflected in, pardon the phrase, a certain malaise that is spread throughout the country and a certain discouragement factor.
You sound like Michael Kinsley.
No, it's selling Jimmy
today.
Carter. I mean, there have been some people who say that Bush's apologies right now are sort of a malaise speech in disguise. I wouldn't read too much into anything. You know, Harold Wilson, I'm sure one of Kudlow's favorite politicians, a Labour prime minister in Britain, okay, said that in politics, a week is a long time. Okay?
That's right.
And George Bush has a long way to go between now and Election Day. What really matters is not what he says tonight. This is not a terribly important speech, but what happens to the economy and the policies that are
But, you know,
followed.
again and again, though,
does.
we're reminded of how sloppy and almost amateurish the administration, and indeed, as Larry pointed out, the congressional approach to all of this is. For example, even the controversy, as you pointed out earlier with me privately, Larry, over the printing of the budget. Were they going to include health costs in there? Were they not? How was it going to be done? Democrats versus Republicans.
And then it wasn't so long. I mean, we had the savings and loan scandal. People were implicated in that. We had this wonderful check bouncing and the cash, and then people weren't paying their dining room bills. I mean, there's some terrific stuff going on.
Are they both
out
vulnerable?
there.
Are both Democrats and Republicans vulnerable?
I mean,
are all incumbents vulnerable?
You know, if this weren't a serious topic, which I think it is, but if it weren't a serious topic, one is sort of tempted to say it's Saturday Night Live, and I think that's the attitude.
There's another
out there.
point. My father always used to say he liked divided government because then those guys would watch each other. Maybe they'd steal less, okay? And maybe the American public feels the same way. I mean,
but you know, every
they
time you think the
continue
public
that
is
way.
at the point where they're going to throw the bums out, they don't throw the bums out.
Well,
do
but they seem to, they may like divided government.
You know, to take Bill's British metaphor, in the 1950 campaign for Prime Minister in England, Churchill was running against Clement Attlee. And at one point, Churchill lashed out and he says, you know, Clement, you could be a sheep in sheep's clothing. And I think the issue with respect to George Bush right now is he a sheep in sheep's clothing, or is he going to really reveal himself to be the Persian Gulf war leader that we saw a year ago?
Okay, well, it's a good analogy there because we are looking at the administration here trying to play this as sort of Operation Domestic Storm. Beyond just the hype and all the hyperbole, will it do the job? The president certainly needs the big lift, examining what's at stake for the State of the Union and for the state of the country and for the state of this presidency after this.
People, we've spent millions giving everyone a computer, and productivity keeps dropping. Where's the productivity? I'm hungry for an answer.
Hungry? Here's mainframe power that fits in a pizza box. Data General's Avion system is the first server with software to make your computers work as a team and save you millions.
Jenkins, I'm famished. Order us an Avion.
To finally profit from your computers, call 1-800-DATA-GEN.
Where do you want to be in 10 years?
Detroit to Minneapolis, Minneapolis to Detroit. That's not why I became a pilot. I'll tell you the run I want. St. Thomas to Saba Island. In my own Grumman Mallard. Call it Dave's Airways. That's what I want for my investments. Now, how do we do it?
You can get there from here. With Shearson Lehman Brothers.
We come from a land so vast, we know how tiring a business trip can be. That's why it was our airline that invented business class, and why we're consistently ranked one of the best in the business world. While some would say it's just the Australian spirit to go further, others know that spirit simply as Qantas.
More valuable than most, this umbrella. Those who carry the Travelers for business insurance carry a 127-year tradition of excellence, upheld by 35,000 employees dedicated to customer satisfaction, chosen by 50% of the Fortune 500. Opened in case you want quality and service the Traveler's way. You're better off under the umbrella.
On June 23rd, BMW introduced the completely redesigned 325i sports sedan. The press has reacted. Have you?
The BMW 325i begins at $28,365.
Hey, Ryan. How you doing, man? How's it going? Okay. Listen, you want to get high? Got some great stuff. No thanks, Mike. That junk's bad news.
Smart kid, that Brian. He doesn't need that stuff. Nobody does. I'm McGruff, the crime dog. And if you want to know what to do if somebody offers you drugs, watch these kids.
Not hitting him today, huh, Slick? If you really want to get up for your game, try some of these.
My game's just fine. That stuff will bring it down.
Way to go, kids. You know the score.
I said no! All right. Way to beam! I'm bored. I'm gonna get wasted.
Why don't you get real?
I've got a better idea. Why don't you get lost?
See that? It's happening everywhere. Kids getting smart and staying straight. So, if anyone ever wants to turn you on, just turn them off. It's a great way to help me take a bite out of crime.
We're the Dolans inviting you to join us here on CNBC for some smart money ideas.
Whether it's stocks, bonds, taxes, or investments in general, join us with your questions and for expert advice.
That's at 6 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. right here on CNBC.
If you'd like to get government booklets on everything, from home repairs to dieting, then you'll want this free catalog. Just drop a line. Write new catalog, Pueblo, Colorado, 81009.
Experience that the American people have.
Okay, now to go on to Larry Kudlow. I say he's the chief economist of Bear Stearns, but it's important to point out, I want Larry maybe to wear his political hat here, the former, one of the former chief people over at the Office of Management and Budget during the Reagan years. Larry, again, what do you think, or what are you expecting tonight?
Well, I think in general terms we're going to see a complete change in Bush administration economic policy. Prior to tonight, for the last 2 years, the administration has been running a very restrictive, punitive policy, raising taxes and raising regulatory costs, which has caused an extended period of economic stagnation, ultimately leading into this recession.
Wait, you're saying the tax increases that he endorsed a couple of years back caused this?
Oh, I think it was a dreadful political and economic mistake, and I think the regulatory mistakes were very significant. Tonight, however, I think you're going to see a complete 180-degree U-turn, and I favor this U-turn. It is a more stimulative policy, as you noted earlier. The President is going to try to propose a series of tax cuts, and he's also proposing a 90-day regulatory freeze, and in general, he's going to try to promote an economic growth program, really for the first time in his administration.
All right. Bill Woman, do you see that 180-degree turn?
Well, what I see is basically, except for the capital gains tax cut, the Group A and Group B that Ann is talking about are essentially Democratic groups. I mean, it's a Democratic Chinese Democratic restaurant, near as I can tell, that he's taking what he's doing from. I think he's making some big mistakes tonight. I think one of the mistakes is I think the American people want a health policy, and I don't think he's going to give them a new health insurance policy.
What is he going to throw everything into the
look,
patch
the
tonight?
fact of the matter is that a health insurance policy is doable. Our health maintenance system and our health care system is not internationally competitive.
Come on, Bill, address one problem at a time here.
The
What do
other
you want,
terrible mistake he's making is this regulatory freeze. In the time with all these doubts about silicone breast implants, to talk about a regulatory freeze makes them extremely vulnerable to the Democrats. It's a real political boo-boo, Neil. So I don't think tonight's performance is going to be strong, which would not be too surprising since his staff is clearly in disarray.
You know, Ann Lewis, I want to get from your perspective here. There is a lot of talk, we don't know the details of the speech yet, that the president will do some fairly dramatic things. Talk that he might substantially cut defense, that he might, in fact, be playing with the numbers a little bit here, borrow from S&L expenditures and the like, and use this for aggressive domestic spending. That on the surface, for whatever you could say of the mathematical chicanery here, seems to at least be dramatic.
Look, I agree that we need a stimulus. If I look at what this country needs to do in the next year, we've got to do some job creation.
We've got to strengthen our manufacturing base. We've got to build consumer confidence, and we've got to fix our health care plan. I couldn't agree more. And you say that our health care costs are keeping us from being competitive. What I don't hear, and what I haven't seen, and this stuff's been leaking out of the White House, this is like watching the Titanic after the iceberg. We've seen a rush of ideas. I haven't seen the kind of coherent policies that would meet those 4 goals.
Well, I haven't seen it out of Democrats either. In all due respect, I've not seen it aggressively out of Democrats either.
Well, let's sort of, I have different standards for what the executive does and for what a legislature can do, and ultimately the legislature will speak to it. But I think if you listen to some of those Democratic presidential candidates, if you listen to Bill Clinton talk about what he would do on the economy, you've heard at least a more coherent policy than you're getting from the White House.
Okay,
right
well, Ann,
now.
that's subject to considerable debate here. But Larry, what are you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some very constructive elements in what I believe will be Bush's program. I agree the focus should be on job creation, because that's the single weakest part of the economy and the confidence factor. Now, to me, if you're worried about jobs, you've got to lower the capital cost, and you've got to lower labor cost, and you've got to provide higher returns for both, so it pays to invest and pays to work. Now, Bush has moved substantially because of pressure from Jack Kemp and Vin Weber and Newt Gingrich. They're going to probably go with
all pretty conservative fellows.
All of my good, hard-thinking friends. They're going to get a 15% capital gains tax rate, which I think is excellent. And by the way,
again, the 19.6 that has been.
Yeah, they've actually lowered that now. And in fact, if you're in the middle income tax bracket, the 15% bracket, you're going to get an 8% capital gains tax rate. So that part I think is good, because you'll get some unlocking of capital and some new liquidity and some new investment in job creation and new businesses.
What if we're wrong on that? A lot of expectations.
Is this a general capital?
I have it on. I mean, that's what all the White House people are saying.
No, even wrong on the impact, I'm saying, Larry.
Well, you know, capital gains tax, for all of the yelling, a lot of Democrats are in favor of a capital gains tax, because over the last 10 or 12 years, it has really been a terrific
Still,
thing.
a lot of those Democrats, Larry, are going to demand something, a pound of flesh for that.
Well, the other point that, before we get to that, I want to make one other point.
One second, if you don't mind. One second.
I think there's a flaw in Bush's proposal, though, on the labor side, with respect to the question of middle-income taxpayers and middle-income working families. The increase in the family allowances really is social policy. It's not economic policy. And where the Bush administration was afraid to tread was in some kind of payroll tax cut or earned income tax credit against the Social Security tax, or lowering the 15% rate. That's a problem, because labor cost is too high right now.
Okay, I'll come back to Ann Lewis right after this. Stay with us.
You can't change the world, but you can change the way you live, like serving more Dannon yogurt to you and your family. You see, where the world is filled with stress, Dannon is filled with calcium, potassium, and real yogurt cultures. Where the world is relentless, Dannon is relaxing, rejuvenating. So while you can't change the world, your life is in your hands. Make Dannon yogurt a very healthy habit for life.
I have this dream. I ride 190 horses at once.
What's the worst part of treating your worst colds?
A cold medicine that leaves me spacey.
Oh, it's the cold medicine that can zonk me out. I hate that.
It's like I'm off in the ozone somewhere. Groggy, spacey.
Introducing Sudafed Severe Cold Formula.
If it could help stop the cough and the fever, but not stop me from getting to work, that'd be great.
The first Sudafed cough, cold, and flu tablet, and it has nothing but maximum strength ingredients.
All that and it won't knock me out? Perfect.
New Sudafed Severe Cold Formula. Maximum strength without drowsiness.
Something's waiting inside the powerful 486 SX computer. A technology that will make it even more powerful. We call it Room for the Future. Introducing built-in upgradability. Check into it. From Intel, the computer inside.
Excuse me, do you know what stock options are?
I wish I did.
When is the weak dollar good for business?
Good? I don't know.
The world of finance and investing can be pretty confusing unless you call for this, the Wall Street Journal's video guide to money and markets. It explains the markets in clear, simple English and brings them to life. This exclusive 30-minute video is free when you call for 13 weeks of the Wall Street Journal for just $37, over 20% off the newsstand price. Subscribe to the Journal and get a daily view of the whole world of business and how it affects you. Information you know you should know. Call now, and you'll be ready next time someone asks you, are munis always a safe investment?
I'm not sure.
Call toll-free 800-942-3200 for 13 weeks of the Wall Street Journal and your free video on money and markets. That's 800-942-3200.
Okay, you're looking at some interesting charts here that were part of the CBS New York Times survey. A Democrat always beats the president, particularly when it's addressing issues like doing something on affordable health care. Take a look at some of these others here. About caring about the middle class's basic problems. A Democrat beats the president handily, any Democrat. Now take a look at just ending the recession. Again, a Democrat decidedly beating the president. Now that's any Democrat. When they start naming names like a Bill Clinton, like a Kerry, then of course you start having differences, and the president leads them by some accounts very handily. But to address the issue how the Democrats might be able to capitalize on this, we're going to go back to Los Angeles because a commercial robbed her of a chance to speak. Ann Lewis, former political director for the Democratic National Committee. Ann, I'd like to get a sense from you how the Democrats play this or what they might be saying in response to this. I know Senator George Mitchell has already said maybe $100 billion sort of a package is more in order than the rumored $50 billion that the administration is looking at. Where do the Democrats do?
Well, let's start by saying, Neil, just before we went off, I wanted to agree with Larry Kudlow for a moment, so I don't want to lose this opportunity, but he was quite right when he said that either an earned income tax credit or reduction in Social Security tax, which we could afford right now, would do a far better job of getting more money in the pockets of more working people, and that's what this economy needs to do.
And do I understand that you are agreeing then with something Larry Kudlow has said?
I said, and so since it's historic, I want to do that, and I got to talk about that one first. And there is, to me, a real contrast in the difference between the two parties. When you look in the Bush plan at tax breaks that would benefit sort of middle-class working people, you find they are small, they are narrowly drawn. It's like this for first-time home buyers. If you happen to have $2,000 in your IRA and you don't own a home, this is going to be a very small number of people. You can then use your own money without a penalty to put in a down payment on the home. I'm not knocking that as a concept, but compare that to the sweeping treatment in lowering of the capital gains tax, no matter what kind of asset you own or buy, no matter how long you've held it, no matter what you use it for. You know, this country is just coming out of a sort of buying binge that we went on in the 80s, where people were trading pieces of paper back and forth. Companies weren't using their tax credits or those long-term, they weren't using capital gains to invest in new manufacturing equipment. They were buying one another and taking the paper profits home.
True.
We don't need to get back to that.
On that. I mean,
well, that's all right. I knew we'd get to an objection, but the day that Macy's goes bankrupt, I think it's fair to say it's not the day to start talking about returning to the boom and bust of the 80s.
We created 20 million new jobs in the 1980s. That's a fact, and the capital gains tax was part of it.
We lost about 3 million since the summer.
But lower income tax rates in the 1980s across the board was also very helpful, and I do agree with Ann on this point. I don't think the administration has sufficiently thought out its middle-income tax issue, nor do I think they're providing enough support for higher labor returns and lower labor costs. If you layer on the increase in payroll taxes, as well as state and local tax increases, as well as a number of regulatory costs, it's really quite expensive, even for a small business, to hire the marginal worker, the next new worker.
So what do you say?
So I think what the administration should do, and I hope what the Congress will do, is give a break to the middle-income labor working people. Either cut back the payroll tax or use some kind of income tax credit or drop the 15% rate. You've got to make it cheaper.
Well, you take from Peter, you have to pay Paul, or vice versa in this case. Wouldn't you take it away from the upper income folks?
No, I absolutely...
That's what the Democrats are looking for.
Well, I understand, and that's going to be a bone of contention. No, I think the last thing this economy needs is some kind of punitive tax increase. I mean, the whole trick here is to grow this pie larger rather than to front people against each other. I mean, East Europe and the Soviet Union have showed us that people want to be free in order to prosper. But that freedom and prosperity should be across the board. We have to give equal opportunity, and I'd like to see the administration negotiate with the Congress something that would reduce labor costs, because I think that's the key to job creation.
I'm glad we're talking about freedom and prosperity and the changes in Eastern Europe, because the second difference that you're clearly going to hear from Democrats is let's talk about realistically what is it that's in our military budget and what needs to be there. I mean, 6 months after that failed coup in Moscow, we've already had, President's already convened the international conference to talk about how we can get aid back to the people of the former Soviet Union in a very rapid turnaround time, and yet the talk about how we lower that defense budget is still smaller.
Let me ask you something, Ann. Just looking at $270 billion defense budget, what would you like to see it cut by?
Well, let me give you a couple of examples of numbers. Why are we still paying $4 billion a year to keep our troops in Japan? And I think it was interesting when President Bush went over there to sort of appeal for help and to appeal for some help with our economic
a very good point, Ann. I just want to ask you, I hear from Democrats a lot, and Republicans, in all due respect, what is a figure? I mean, cut it 20%, 30%? What are we talking about? What would you like to see?
I don't want to start with $275 billion and cut it 20%. I want to start with, we live in a different world today. What is it we need to defend ourselves and to meet our obligations? Right, and I want to celebrate it. You know, the Cold War is over. We won. Instead of starting with the old budget and working backward, no company would do that. No corporate planner would start that way. Let's start with what we need to do and build up.
The world
we
is
could
still
go way
but
below
in fact,
a 10%
the world is
cut.
still a dangerous place.
Well, I think politically, Ann is 180 degrees off, if I may say so. The reason is, I think George Bush tonight is going to talk about pretty big defense cuts, and I think it's upsetting the public.
Another $50 billion.
Well, I think we're some pretty massive changes in programs, and I think what
$50 billion this year?
Well,
no.
Over 5 years?
I do think we have to start thinking about, I hate to use the word conversion. There are public spending, public investment programs that really ought to be put in place for some orderly conversion of defense. Because I think people are going to be shaken up again tonight about the consequences of the defense.
Could I come back from the particulars, though? I think those are very good ideas, but I want to get back to an issue I think that Ann interestingly raised in the beginning, and that was just the perception of the president. And Ann, before I take this to Larry, too, I want to have you address that issue. A year ago, Larry and I were mentioning this during the break, you had the president like Julius Caesar, and now a year later, a man almost without an office. What happened? What's going on here?
I mean, 1 year ago, George Bush is the leader of the international coalition. He's sort of astride the free world like the Colossus of Rhodes. Exactly 1 year later, you have an embattled candidate on his way up to New Hampshire to sort of have scripted meetings with a cow and stand there and say, message, I care. And I think what happened is that the world changed faster than the president did. And that while he still has, frankly, his heart and his mind over there making international policy, the needs here at home have moved faster. And you know, the American public are not dumb. And what we're talking about today is there is a common sense atmosphere here. They know that things have been moving away from them. They're terribly concerned about their own futures, things like...
Okay, and Larry Kudlow, what do you think?
But I don't think the situation is quite so pessimistic, because, again, I come back to our earlier points. We are at record low interest rates and record low inflation rates, and these could be pillars of the next recovery. My own judgment is there's nothing wrong with our economy fundamentally that couldn't be helped by some...
Bill Womack?
I would say yes, but not certainly.
Okay, I want to thank you, Bill Womack, Chief Economist of Business Week, Larry Kudlow, Chief Economist over at Bear Stearns, and that's all the time we have. You were terrific. Appreciate having you with us, Democratic analyst Ann Lewis. For everyone on Business Insiders, I'm Neil Cavido. Have a good night and enjoy the speech tonight.